Mrs. Ekaterine Tkeshelashvili. It's indeed an honor to be able to interview you today at the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy. My first question to you would be, in the last 2 decades, Georgia has experienced major internal migration flux due in parts to the regional conflicts with Abkhazia in the beginning of the 90s and with South Ossetia in 2008. As former state minister for reintegration, could you describe what kind of strategies are being practiced to address the issue of integration of the IDP?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and then I thank you for that opportunity. There needs to be a bit of an explanation, I guess, to what happened when we speak about the IDPs and then why Georgia has this problem, because that speaks itself. What are the resolution sort of recipes for that, if one can call that a recipe at all? So in the 90s and then in 2008 as well, it was more than the regional conflict in a sense, or internal conflicts that the Georgia faced, and then in 2008 it was a clear-cut invasion that Georgia experienced at the time from the Russian Federation, and then the massive influx of IDPs in the rest of Georgia from those regions, and then refugees outside of Georgia as well, because many of those who lived in those regions fled not only inside of Georgia but then outside of Georgia as well. So that we have quite many refugees from those regions as well who are outside of Georgia. They have been all victims of crimes against humanity, basically ethnic cleansing, because it was not a migration-related process, or the process which was sort of predominated was of preconditioned because of the economic conditions or anything else that is usually a factor when we speak about the migration. But it was a very specifically targeted process that had a specific aim into it, which is directly commensurate to what the definition of the ethnic cleansing is. So here we speak about a very large mass of persons, individuals, especially for the small country like Georgia. Georgia is 4.5 million people, and we have 450,000 people, roughly speaking, who are outside of those regions. They have habitual residences in both regions of Abkhazia, South Ossetia, Sakhalin Valley region. So proportionally speaking, that's quite a big number, not only in statistics, but then in terms of all the human stories are behind those statistics, and then the family lives, and then having no possibility of actually exercising the fundamental right of return, basically. I myself come from the family which is partially experiencing that victimization, so to say, of that process in a sense. My mother comes from the region of Abkhazia, so her whole family is outside, obviously, because they're ethnically Georgian. And I'm half-raised myself in Abkhaz region, so I still very well remember my house, my neighbors, and very good relations, by the way, with my Abkhaz neighbors and friends, which on a personal note is still there, and that's an encouraging factor for the future, obviously. So what is the strategy when we speak about the problem of that, of dealing with that tragedy and then an actual lives of those who are in the condition of not being able to go to home and then being in the position of being IDPs? And there's this dualistic approach to that. When we speak about the diplomacy and when we speak about the straight strategy of addressing the issue, obviously, issue of return is a fundamental issue that the state always stresses in all negotiating processes, because it's a fundamental right of being able to return to your home. So no matter what comes on the front of social rights and then, in that sense, integration-related processes into the normal economic life in the rest of Georgia, the fundamental right of return is just the biggest right that all of them do have. And time is not healing the wounds that are connected with that. It comes from one generation to another generation. My cousin, who is in his early 20s, he doesn't remember at all the place. If you ask him where he comes from, he will name the city and then the place in Abkhaz region that he originally comes from. And that's how all the families raise their children. So time is not a curing factor. As long as there will be no possibility of return, this will be an open wound socially, and there will need to be treatment that need to be curing that problem. But then when it comes to the social integration and then how we deal with the human tragedy related with the abnormality of starting up the new life in the new place, basically, that's obviously a challenge for the country, which is a small country. In the 90s, the state itself was in a very poor financial state, so there was not much of an assistance that one can deliver to those who were, and then it was international community mostly that was delivering help to IDPs at that time. But even at those times and later on as well, I firmly can say with our government for sure, but then even with the previous government that was out from that position as a result of revolution, Georgian government never used IDPs as the playing card politically, so that there would have been no reintegration related processes or economic integration related policies in the rest of Georgia, so that we would sort of use bad conditions of the IDPs in a way that we would remind the international community how bad their situation is, so that there would have been a bit of a more pressure that the international community would exert on the question of return. And that has never been manipulated and used for that purpose. But then when countries started to develop, has economic growth, and then more of the possibilities, we've started to have a huge program related with the housing-related issues. And then, again, this was done in different ways, buying property for them, outsourcing government resources so that the new buildings would have been built for that purpose. It's still an ongoing process. Not all the housing-related issues are being resolved, but then the main sort of umbrella dimension is the following: that being an IDP should not be a socially distinguishing factor for a person. It only has to remain sort of a human rights related issue of not being able to go to the home, but then a person cannot be socially stigmatized by the fact that he or she is an IDP. And the huge challenge obviously is to help and promote the inclusion into the economic life in the rest of Georgia, so they have good education, they have possibilities of getting jobs and realizing their human potential. And again, that's a work in progress, and there are good achievements into that, but then one can never be satisfied with the results when you have such a big problem. So we try to be responding to that, and we're very grateful to the international community, which plays still a continuing role into that. I'll have link out Georgian government in that dimension.
Move to question number 3.
Okay. The European Union has been an important partner, also functioning as mediator between conflicting parties. Do you think that Georgia should continue to set its eye on Europe and working towards integration into NATO, or should the relation with the Middle East be strengthened?
Well, for Georgia, actually, there's not that much of a choice. I mean, there is a very strong belief and understanding based on the historical roots of Georgia, but then based on the value and principle-based approach to the future of Georgia, that we're a European nation, and we belong to the European community of states when it comes to the community of democratic states in that sense, and then in overall to the Euro-Atlantic space. And then in that, obviously, NATO comes into the picture as well. So it's security, it's the politics, it's the economy, and overall. We try to be contributing partner already now as well. When we speak about the NATO, Georgia is the biggest per capita contributor as a non-ally member in Afghanistan. We've been in Iraq as well, and then we are there without any caveats. So our troops are fighting there with the members, with the soldiers and the members of the NATO in such a way that as long as we can contribute to the common security, we're already eager to do that. So it's a hugely important issue for Georgia. That's the not only geopolitical, but a sort of a moral understanding of the nation where we see the future and current belonging too. Having said that, I mean, we are obviously very much not only interested but integrally integrated in the regional dimensions of the developments. We have excellent neighborly relations with anybody except for the Russia, who is occupying 20% of Georgia, so it's hard to have in that sense good relations with the country. But then other than that, with all of the neighbors, excellent relations, all political, economic, cultural relations. We've never been in a cultural or political dimension part of Middle East in a sense, but then we've had great influences from the region, and then we've been sort of a neighboring region to that region as a Black Sea region, and then Caspian Sea continuation into the Caucasus as well. But then that's where we stand right now. We have very good relations with the countries in the Middle East. We try to have very productive sort of bilateral relations in that sense. But in terms of geopolitical sort of belonging institutionally, that's obviously Euro-Atlantic space in that sense. And that is very much connected with the issue of current situation as well already, not only with the way how we see the future development.
The next question will be also related to the cultural bridges Georgia is building. Georgia is a country which is bridging two continents, actually. European and Christian, as well as Oriental and Islamic influences have shaped the country's cultural heritage. Could you tell us how the country and society managed to combine and integrate those cultures and religion while keeping the Georgia culture so alive and unique?
Well, it's an interesting story. I mean, if we see that through historic lens, so to say, of Georgia, we've been mostly surrounded historically by Muslim countries. Muslim religion was always part of our cultural and religious heritage, even though Georgia is predominantly Christian, Orthodox Christian country. For us, Christianity was always part of national identity in those times, not now as a secular country in a sense, because it was part of retaining sort of identity in that sense, obviously. But I guess the key to that was the tolerance and inclusiveness that was always part of our culture and our state, at the time kingdom in that sense. All religions and ethnicities were always fully included into the Georgian social fabric. And that was the key of survival of the uniqueness in terms of the national or cultural identity of Georgia, maintaining its own Christian identity, but then cohabiting with the other identities in one bigger identity, so to say, in the country. Even in the times when we've had wars or troubles with our big empires in the neighborhood at the time, the Turkic or Persian empires at those times, Muslim communities in Georgia have never had any troubles. We're continuously very proud to be a nation that Jewish community, let's say, had been always part of Georgian community, and unlike to some other locations worldwide when the persecution was part of a problem with Jewish communities, Georgia was always unique in that there was never any problem in that dimension. So multilingual, multi-ethnic, multi-religious part of our identity was something that we are proud of, and then we continuously will be proud of, because I believe that will be always part of the state policy as well, of encouraging and promoting that in many ways. Soviet Union was a bit disruptive in that sense, but we're overcoming some of the bad legacies that it left in that dimension.
Thank you very much.
The last question is about the tourism business in Georgia. Could you tell us why and how does Georgia promote its culture outside? And does cultural diplomacy play an important role?
Well, I would say that it could sound ironic, but then in a way we are decreasing cultural diplomacy for one reason. We've been predominantly known in the Soviet Union, and then after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, as a country with the cultural branding into that. So cultural diplomacy was, in that sense, even only diplomacy that Georgia had. So we had to diversify, basically. So that's why when I speak about the proportional decrease of that role, without undermining, obviously, or understating the role of that. Georgia's culture, it's maybe biased approach from my side, obviously, but then has been always part of a Georgian identity and brand in such a sense that was a bit of an ambassador for us always outside of Georgia, in a sense, how we would map us out as a country, make us worth of remembering in a sense, and unique, so that we would distinguish ourselves in this greater world of so many interesting identities. So we try to retain that, obviously, and then promote that. And cultural tourism even plays now a big role when we speak about the growth of the tourism. You have to have different practicalities embedded when it comes to the tourism, how you promote that, and it comes with part of an economic situation, infrastructural growth, and then easiness of coming in, enjoying the time, and then have all of that being present. But then you have many other places, obviously, in the world which are already very well developed, good infrastructure for the tourism, but exactly the cultural uniqueness in that sense, and then the diversification of the cultural potential there is something that makes us attractive from that point of view as well. So we see tourism growing in all of these dimensions. It's the ecotourism, it's the sort of sport-related tourism when it comes to the skiing, it's the leisure, but then it's purely cultural as well. People coming in, enjoying the cultural sites, going to the outside of the city sort of locations, and then enjoying the regional dimension of development of the country, historic part of it, and then that's a very productive part of the economy right now that grows, and we try to maintain that. As I've said, what the government can do is to have the policies that promotes infrastructural growth, promotes security in a country. We're very proud of being one of the most secure countries in Europe right now, and by that encouraging tourists to come and enjoy our country.
Okay. So thank you very much. As experience, I can say that Georgia is unforgettable in the end. So thank you very much for being here.